Hi guys and girls, I'm Karel from the store department and I'm super excited. I've got a new shirt, I've got a new background, and I've got the best video for you I've ever created. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it's also going to be a long video, between 15 and 20 minutes, but I'm going to teach you stuff that you have never heard before. You will be looking at this film in the way you've never seen it before. You know what film I'm talking about. Jaws. Nearly 45 years old and still fresh as anything. Maybe except for the somewhat outdated shark effects. But other than that, the story is still super effective. And we're going to look at a number of ways Steven Spielberg achieved this. Now, Jaws was phenomenally successful and it effectively transformed the film industry. How did it do that? First of all, before Jaws, the main box office season was not around summertime. It was the end of the year. It was somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's when the major movies would be released, and that's when most tickets would be bought. Everything changed from 1975, the summer of Jaws. It never changed ever again. Since then, we've always had this top movie season. The second way in which Jaws changed the movie business was that previously movies would be released in the major cities and then pan out to the rest of the country, and that way the studios would save on print costs. They would only need to print a few hundred copies of the film. After Jaws, they started doing these major releases, nationwide, thousands of prints, and it worked. It worked because they could create hype more easily, and you've seen recently how this hype now works with the massive blockbusters movies such as Black Panther and the Avengers. But back to Jaws. Why was Jaws so successful? It was not because of the hype. It was because this is an exquisitely well-written and well-directed feature film. It was the breakthrough for Steven Spielberg, who has had an enormously successful career ever since. Previously, he'd done, I think, one or two other films, Jewel and Sugarland Express, both of which fantastic. But Jaws really blew everything out of the water. In this video, I'm going to focus primarily on the midpoint reversal. I'm going to make a case, again, of how important that midpoint reversal is, how it pivots the story, how it shows you that you understand what your story is about, and it also makes it much easier to write that second act. Now, I assume that most of you will know what Jaws is about. It's about this sheriff in a small coastal town, Amity, who had just arrived with his family from New York, where he was only a number. Whereas here in Amity, one man can make a difference, as he said. But that obviously depends on his behavior. And he's not making much of a difference initially in the first half of the film, because he has this one problem, and it's a pattern that emerges if you study the film properly and if you read the screenplay. Now, I'd seen Jaws 5 times, and up to that point, I believed my friends and the experts and the gurus who all said, this is a movie about a man who overcomes the fear of water, who cannot swim, but still goes into the water to kill the shark. Now, there will be some spoilers in this video, but I promise it will be worth it. And I hope to demonstrate that this is not a film about a guy overcoming his fear of water. It goes a lot deeper. Let's have a look at the first clip. And to set up my case, you need to first understand the principles that I use when I look at film analysis. 3 critical components are character, event, and action. The character, obviously Brody, it's his point of view. We experience the story through his eyes. Secondly, the major event, that is the inciting incident and or the call to adventure. Jaws is a fantastic film to demonstrate the difference between the two, because in Jaws they are split. And then thirdly, you'll need to know what is the major action. What's the action the character takes in the course of this film? Very simply, in Jaws, obviously it is trying to kill the shark. Now, actually, it is not that simple. We'll get to that. But what I want to show you in the first clip is the lead up to the call to adventure. The first images of the film, which I'm not going to show, is when we see the swimmer, the girl taken by the shark, and then we go to the next morning where we see Brody in the kitchen with his family, and he receives the phone call that there's a body washed up on the beach. Now, it's important to understand that there is some time in between, and there's just enough time to show us what sort of guy Brody is. And it may sound like a throwaway line, what he says in response to his son, who you will see in the short clip that I'm playing next. But that line is a key to what this film is really about. It's not there by coincidence. So let's have a quick look.
Mom, I got cut. I got hit by a vampire.
You guys were playing on those swings. Those swings are dangerous. Stay off there. I haven't fixed them yet.
I think you're gonna live. It's not the prettiest thing I've ever seen.
So this is the call, a literal call to adventure. This is the first time the hero hears about the problem, and this problem will end up changing his life. So what happened just before the call came in? We saw his son come into the kitchen with bleeding hands, and apparently the swings are not safe. And apparently Brody had told his son not to go on the swings. This is a foreshadowing. This is a mini story telling us what the bigger picture of Jaws is going to be about. If you have seen Toy Story 2, you may remember the exact same thing. We have, in the beginning of the film, a very short 2 or 3 minute clip where we see the penguin, the toy penguin being taken away by the mother. She's the penguin is kidnapped, and then Woody goes out to save him. This is, in a nutshell, the whole story of Toy Story 2, because next, Woody is going to be kidnapped and the other toys are going to save him. So we have the same thing here. We see in this brief scene play out on a miniature scale what the whole movie of Jaws is going to be about. It's not about a guy who's afraid of water. It's about a guy who lacks responsibility, who is telling instead of doing. And if you know actions speak louder than words, well, he's not speaking very loud here, because continually throughout that first half of Act 1, he will display this pattern of telling people not to do things instead of removing the threat. I'll give you another example of my case. This is Brody's immediate response to learning that there's a threat out there. It's probably a shark, and this is what he's going to do in response.
Not a beach umbrella, not a sun lounger, no beach balls. If I can't get service from you, I'm gonna get service. Chief!
So he's going to the hardware store to draw some signs and then put up signs telling people don't go on the beach. Now, we accept that because it's early in the story and it's probably the immediate thing he can do. And it's kind of like, the first solution the audience would think of. And that's how you write films. You always need to make sure you tick off the way the audience would respond to it, which is not necessarily the right response within the character's psychological setup. So this is another version of what we've seen in the kitchen. He's now going to tell the people not to go on the beach in the same way he told his son not to play on the swings. But we know what happened to the son. So, subliminally, what we're setting up here is this is not going to work either. So it's a very powerful foreshadowing of the misery that is awaiting Brody. Another scene, pretty much the same, and because they are so short and this theme is not really rubbed into your face, it works. It works on a very gentle subliminal level. So here's the other scene.
Hey, Mikey really loves his present.
Where is he?
Sitting in it.
Good. All right, Michael, out of the boat!
Obviously, Michael has an answer to that because he doesn't understand danger. Parents, rather than telling kids not to do something, they should create a safe environment. So if you're a responsible parent, that's what you do. Until the kids have their own responsibility, you make sure the environment is safe, rather than telling them not to do this or that. At least that is the morality of this film. So it's a worldview within which this film was written. And it was written by Peter Benchley, and we're going to look at a few scenes from the final draft screenplay that you see the cover page here. First, we're going to page 16, and we'll find a number of lines spoken by Brody that sound very much like the ones that you've just heard. They may not be in the film. I don't think they are in the film, in fact, and maybe Spielberg realized that he might have been going a little bit too far. So if this had been included as well, this theme might have been hammered home just a little bit too much. So Brody here says, I told you not to wear that crackerjack ring. It's too big. You're going to catch it on something and lose a finger. It's another warning rather than removing the threat, avoiding or eradicating the cause of the problem in the first place. That was page 16. We're going to page 47. There we see this. I told him not to go out until he memorized the handbook, safety regulations, and so forth. So I think that is that was where he was in the dinghy. And then thirdly, this is page 48. Don't sleep with that on, son. You'll cut something in the night. All point towards the exact same behavior. Here's a father telling his son not to do certain things rather than create a safe environment. When does this change? It changes at the halfway point, the midpoint reversal. His behavior changes. He reverses from being irresponsible to taking responsibility. Now, there's another interesting thing as a result, as a consequence of this. So in the first half of the film, you can say that the action Brody takes is to warn people, but his overall intention is to keep them safe, to protect the people of Amity. Now, that is a very open objective. It's not an objective that has an endpoint where we feel, okay, well, now the film is over and we can go home. For that, you need a very clearly defined visual endpoint. And visualized goals are often very powerful. Take Up, the Pixar movie Up, where we see the painting of the house on the Paradise Falls cliff. That's what we want to see at the end of the movie. And once we see that image, we know that the film is going to be over. So here, protecting the people of Amity is something that has no end. That's open-ended. That will go on as long as Brody is in his function as a sheriff. However, what changes at the midpoint reversal, the pivot, is now he will decide to remove the threat to kill the shark. And see, this is something you can use in pretty much any film that has to do with clear antagonists, with villains, nemesis who need to be removed. In a lot of crime films, a lot of thrillers, up to the midpoint, it's about finding information, finding out who is the threat. Once the threat is known, the threat will need to be removed, killed in mythical terms. And that's what we see in the movies. So let's see where that point is in Jaws, where the character changes, where Brody changes his behavior, he changes his approach, and he's going to take action. This is the scene.
Hey, fellas! Fellas! Hold in the sheet! Make it fast! Hey, you guys. You guys okay over there?
I've cut just before you were going to see the shark, but it's still a spoiler, and I warned you there was going to be spoilers, and sometimes it's worth spoiling things so you have an opportunity to learn. So midpoint reversal, up to this point, and I wanted to say that midpoint reversal is a dual reversal. First, we have a reversal of fortune. That's the events that happen to the character. They change in a meaningful way, in a very big way at the midpoint reversal. And then you have a reversal of action where the character changes his behavior. So what's the reversal of fortune? Up to this point, his family has not been affected. His family has been safe. The shark has not threatened them. That clearly changes here because the shark misses his son by a hair. And he realizes that. So things get personal. And you find that very often at the midpoint reversal in movies, the relationship between the shadow character and the protagonist, between protagonist and antagonist, becomes personal. So now they know of each other and they're going for one another. And we know that obviously at the end we'll have the standoff and only one will survive. So the midpoint reversal, things get personal. There's a reversal of fortune. So the sheriff is not so lucky anymore. His family, well, he was lucky here, but he came very close to his family. He now realizes he needs to change his action, and that is the reversal of action. So instead of just telling, now he's going to act on it. I'm going to show you one more clip. That's the clip just before he goes out into the ocean, and it's the last time he displays his his behavior, his flawed behavior of warning, of telling rather than doing. And this is in the few words he exchanges with his wife before he gets on board of the boat.
Don't use the fireplace in the den because I haven't fixed the flue yet. Tell them I'm going fishing.
So yeah, don't use the fireplace in the den because it's dangerous. Here's a house that's a death trap. The swings aren't safe, the fireplace is not safe, and in the screenplay we had a few other examples. So rather than taking action and removing the threat, this character was just telling people not to go there in the exact same way he did with the people of Amity in relation to the shark. So that to me is the theme of the film. It's not about a guy overcoming his fear of water. It's a guy learning responsibility and taking on the cause at the root. And for that, yes, he needs to fight his inner conflict, needs to fight his worst fears and go out and kill the shark. And that's how this film is structured beautifully, with almost 2 acts if you wish. The first act is in response to the shark killing the girl, the swimmer, and the second act, if you wish, is in response to the shark almost killing the son. Now, I don't want to confuse you. This 2-act structure business, if you want to read up on that, I'll put an article link down below. For now, let's just look at the 3-act structure. End of Act 1 is the determination of the sheriff to solve the problem. First in the flawed way, midpoint reversal, now he's going to kill the shark, and the 3rd act is the climax in which he finds a way, he thinks of a way of resolving it. And if you haven't seen the film, I'll leave that for you to discover. And frankly, you should watch the film because it is such an important classic in so many ways. I hope I've convinced you of that in this video. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me just quickly point you to a few more resources that I highly recommend. There's the Story Department blog where you can read up on Jaws, on the difference between inciting incident and call to adventure, about midpoint reversal and so forth. Then there's Logline It, where you can test your loglines and your story concepts before you write them. It's free. All we ask is for you to also review 2 other loglines, and you don't need to be an expert. You can just give your gut response to the actual core story that's written in that 1 sentence. And then finally, there's Immersion Screenwriting. That's a course, that's a paid course. Have a look at it. If it's your thing, you might consider it. And otherwise, maybe later. It's a wonderful course. It allows you to go through 20 actually of the best screenplays ever written and study their style and their structure in a guided way, step by step. Enough for now. Give us some comments. Did you enjoy this video? What did you find out when you watched Jaws for the 6th or the 10th time? Who knows? And tell us what you would like to see covered in future videos. Thanks for watching. Hoping to see you for the next video. Bye. Look, I chopped off my own head. If you subscribe to this channel, I promise I will chop off someone else's head and you can choose whose. In the meantime, why not check out these truly interesting videos here, and don't forget to subscribe.